My hand shot out before I understood what it was reaching for. The floor beneath the festival crowd had just split down the middle, wide panels sliding apart to show the station's plasma core glowing far below, and I was standing right on the edge of that gap with nothing under my boots but open air. Nobody had warned me that the gathering of threads always opened this way, the deck parting to remind every guest that one careless step could cost everything. I only knew that my balance was gone, and my arm swung out searching for anything solid to hold. What it found was a hand already raised in front of me, fingers curved into a careful, deliberate grip, reaching towards someone else across the crowd. I grabbed it, I held on, and the moment my palm closed around hers, the music died, and somewhere behind me, a low voice began to count. 1. My boots found the edge of the deck again. My heart was still slamming from the fall that almost was. 2. The woman whose hand I had caught went completely still. Her skin, a pale gray a breath earlier, flushed a deep gold from her collar to her cheeks, faster than I thought skin could change color. 3. A voice rang out across the hall in formal Threnai, and Grace Bennett's fingers dug into my arm before the translation even reached my earpiece. "Eli," she whispered, "do you have any idea what you just did?" I did not. I would understand within the next 10 seconds, and I would spend the rest of the night wishing I still didn't. The gesture I had accidentally caught was called the Shavana, a formal offer of courtship made once, in public, before witnesses. If the receiving hand did not pull free within that count of 3, the offer became a binding claim under Threnai law, recognized that same night by the ruling council. Grace explained all of this in a rushed, urgent whisper while the crowd around us stood frozen, waiting to see what I would do next. The woman was Silara Thren, daughter of Vesa Thren, who led the Threnai delegation currently locked in treaty talks with our own ambassador Edmund Whitmore, one deck above us. Silara had not raised her hand for me. She had raised it for Korik Dassin, a council member's son standing 3 feet to my left, his expression sliding from expectant to furious in under 4 seconds. I had stumbled into another man's proposal and stolen it by accident. Vesa Thren crossed the hall before the echo of the count had finished. She did not look at her daughter first. She looked at me, and her voice, when it came, was carved from ice. "You will release her hand now, human, or you will answer for what happens next." I looked down. Silara's fingers were still curled around mine, and beneath the gold flush climbing her neck, I saw something else in her eyes, something that looked almost like relief mixed with dread, as if she had braced herself for a worse ending to her evening than this. There was a way out. Grace had already told me, in that same urgent whisper, that a claim made by accident could be reversed through something called the unbinding, right there in front of everyone. It was legal. It was fast. It was also, she said, built to humiliate whichever party was released, and that shame would fall on Silara, not on me, because Threnai law had never once imagined a human hand catching a Shavana by mistake. I thought about letting go. I thought about it for exactly as long as it took Korik to open his mouth and start demanding the unbinding on my behalf, as though my answer already belonged to him. I did not let go. "I accept the claim," I said, in the plainest Threnai I knew, and the hall went so silent I could hear the plasma core humming through the open deck behind me. Ambassador Whitmore found me an hour later in a corridor 3 levels up, his face the color of old parchment. "Do you understand what you have done?" he said, not really asking. "The Concord depends on tomorrow's vote. 5 years of work on shared defense and open trade routes, and half the reason we needed this alliance in the first place is sitting 2 systems away, watching our supply lines the way a wolf watches a fence with a gap in it. You have just handed Korik Dassin a reason to burn all of it down over an insult to his pride." He did not exaggerate. Meridian Station was the only neutral ground either government had ever agreed to share, built precisely because neither side trusted the other's territory enough to meet anywhere else. If the Concord collapsed now, there would be no second station and no second chance, only 2 fleets drifting further apart while whatever was moving through the dark 2 systems away kept getting closer. I had spent 6 months training for nights like this one, memorizing every protocol meant to keep small mistakes from becoming large ones, and none of it had prepared me for the particular mistake of falling for someone else's intended bride in front of a hall full of witnesses. He was right to be afraid. Korik's father sat on the ruling council, and Korik himself had already gone to that council within the hour, demanding the claim be struck down as void, since it was never truly offered and never truly meant. Vesa Thren, to my genuine shock, refused him. Not out of any kindness toward me, she made clear, but because Threnai law was specific and unforgiving on this point. A caught Shavana was binding whether it was meant or not, and only an unbinding, performed by the one who received it, could undo it. Korik could rage all he wanted. He could not simply reach in and take his claim back on my behalf. What he could do, and did, before the sun cycle ended, was invoke an older custom, one so rarely used that even Grace had to dig through station records to explain it to me. When a claim arose from unusual circumstance, accident, chance, confusion, either family could demand approving before the council recognized it fully. The claimed pair would walk the Ember Walk together, hands joined from first step to last, across a woven bridge suspended directly over the plasma core. The bridge answered to more than weight. Its stabilizing field responded to the calm or the fear of the two people crossing it, and a claim born of true intention was said to walk steady, while a claim born of falsehood shook itself apart before it ever reached the far side. Korik smiled when he said it. I understood, even then, that he expected me to refuse, and if I refused, the claim would be voided by default, and Scylara would carry that shame for the rest of her life among her own people. I did not refuse. Scylara found me that night on the observation deck, the plasma core glowing beneath the transparent floor like something alive and patient. You do not have to do this, she said. Her voice was quieter than it had been in the hall, with no crowd left to perform for. My mother would understand if you asked for the unbinding instead. No one expects a human to walk the Ember Walk for a claim he never meant to make. Did you want him? I asked. Korik, is that who you truly meant to choose? She was quiet long enough that I thought she would not answer at all. I meant to choose safety, she said finally. Korik's family has influence, and mine has needed it since my father died and left our house weaker than it looked to outsiders. I raised my hand because it was sensible, not because my heart was anywhere near it. And now? I said. Now a stranger's hand caught mine instead, and for the first time in longer than I can remember, I am not thinking about what is sensible at all. I did not have a clever answer for that. I only knew that whatever had started as a stumble had stopped feeling like a mistake somewhere in the last few hours, and I was not ready to hand that feeling over to a council vote just to make my own life simpler. The council granted us 2 days before the proving, and on the first of them, Vesa Thren summoned me alone to a private chamber near the treaty hall. She did not offer me a seat. You should know what the Ember Walk cost the last pair who failed it, she said. 2 generations ago, a claimed man refused to trust the bridge, and his fear alone brought the field down around him before anyone could reach the manual release. He survived. He did not walk again without a cane for the rest of his life. I tell you this so that you understand. I am not testing my daughter's happiness on a children's game. Then why allow it at all? I said. Why not simply void the claim and be done with the danger? Because the Ember Walk is the only proof my people still trust, she said. Words are cheap between our worlds right now, human. Everyone in that treaty hall is trading promises they intend to keep only as long as it costs them nothing. I need to know what you are worth when it costs you something. She left me with that, and I understood for the first time that Vesa Thren was not simply guarding tradition. She was guarding her daughter and her people against exactly the kind of empty promise the Concord itself was built from, if nobody proved otherwise. The second day brought a formal dinner, one Korik had specifically requested, citing his right as challenger to observe the claimed pair under proper Threnai custom before the proving. I understood within the first 10 minutes that he had built the entire evening as a trap. Every course arrived with its own small ritual, a phrase to speak, a gesture to make, an order in which certain dishes could or could not be touched, and Korik watched every mistake I made with the patience of a man keeping careful count. I made several. I used the wrong hand for the bread course. I spoke a blessing meant only for elders to the wrong end of the table. Twice, Korik corrected me himself, loudly enough for the entire hall to hear, each correction dressed up as courtesy and landing like an accusation. Scylara did not correct me in front of anyone. She waited until the servers cleared a course, then shifted her chair a few inches closer to mine and, without looking at me, moved her own hand through the next gesture slowly enough that I could copy it under the table without anyone else seeing. We got through the rest of the dinner that way, her hand teaching mine in small, hidden movements, and by the final course, Korik had stopped correcting me at all, because there was nothing left to correct. He left the hall early that night, and Grace told me afterward that he had gone straight to request private access to the Ember Walk itself, a right traditionally granted to any challenger before approving, meant only for inspection. Nobody could refuse him without breaking custom. Nobody at the time had any proof he intended more than a look. Later that night, Grace found me in the docking corridor, a data slate glowing in her hands. She had pulled every schematic of the Ember Walk she could access, going back to when the station was first built, and none of it had made her look any less worried. The regulator has one weakness, she said. It reads calm through pulse and breath, nothing more. It can tell if a person is afraid. It cannot tell if a person believes in what they are doing. If someone found a way to push those readings without pushing the person, the field would not know the difference until it was already failing. I asked her if she thought Korik would try something like that. I think a man who lost a bride he never truly wanted to keep, only to lose face over losing her, will do whatever keeps his name out of the record, she said. I cannot prove anything yet. I only know he asked for private access to that bridge, and nobody in Threnai law has ever thought to ask why. I did not sleep well. I kept picturing the last man who failed the walk, and the Cain Vesa had described without a hint of exaggeration in her voice. For a while I let myself imagine asking Ambassador Whitmore to request the unbinding on some quiet diplomatic technicality, sparing everyone the risk. I imagined it for exactly as long as it took me to picture Silara walking back into that hall alone, and I stopped imagining it at all. The morning of the proving. The observation hall filled the way it had filled for the festival. Except this time nobody was dancing. Vesa Thren stood at the head of the council beside Ambassador Whitmore, whose face had settled into the particular calm of a man who had already written 3 versions of his resignation letter. Korik stood near the front, arms folded, watching the walkway with an expression I did not have time to read before the speaker called our names. Silara took my hand at the edge of the bridge. Her grip was steady. Mine, I noticed, was not, and I forced it still before she could feel it shake. "Walk slowly," she said under her breath. "Breathe. The field listens more than it watches." We stepped onto the ember walk together. The woven cable held our weight without a sound, a faint gold light tracing up through the strands beneath our boots. Below us, through the gaps in the weave, the plasma core turned its slow blue light upward, close enough that the heat of it pressed against my skin like standing too near an open oven. We made it perhaps a third of the way across before the first tremor ran through the cable. It was small. I told myself it was small. Silara's fingers tightened around mine, and I matched my breathing to hers, the way she had shown me the night before over dinner, without either of us naming it as practice, and the tremor faded. We kept walking. Behind us, I heard Grace's voice, low and urgent, arguing with someone near the control station, and I did not have room in my head to wonder what about. The second tremor was not small. The bridge lurched sideways hard enough that Silara's feet slid out from under her, and only my grip on her hand kept her from going over the edge into open air above the core. I planted my boots against the woven cable and hauled her back toward center, my shoulder aching with the sudden weight, the heat below us surging as something in the deck beneath the walkway began venting early, far earlier than the safety cycle should have allowed. Grace's voice reached me clearly this time, shouting across the hall that the regulator had been tampered with. Its calibration shifted just enough that no ordinary comm could hold the field steady, not without both safety backups firing in sequence, and one of those backups was reading as offline. Korik had not sabotaged the bridge to end us. I understood that even as the cable shuddered again beneath our boots, he had tuned it to fail just enough to prove his point, that a claim built on an accident could not survive a true test, that panic would take us both and the council would have no choice but to call the claim void and unearned. He had not counted on Silara refusing to panic. "Look at me," she said, and I did, instead of at the widening gaps in the cable or the rising heat, or the crowd frozen at either end of the walkway. Not the fire, me. I held her eyes and matched my breathing to hers again, forcing my grip to loosen instead of tighten, forcing my shoulders down from around my ears, and beneath our boots the wild shuddering of the cable began, slowly, to even out. It was not enough on its own. The primary field steadied, but the vent below kept pouring heat upward in long rolling waves, and I could see the far edge of the walkway now, close enough to reach, too far to trust. "The second backup," Grace shouted. "Someone needs to trigger it manually. There is a release 2 meters ahead of you, on the left support strut. 2 meters. On a bridge that would not hold still, over a plasma core, with one hand bound to Silara's by law and by choice, and by every step we had already taken. I did not let go of her hand. I stretched my free arm out as far as the strut would allow, felt the release catch beneath my fingers, cold metal against the growing heat all around us, and threw every bit of strength I had left into pulling it down. The second field caught the bridge like a hand closing around it. The shuddering stopped all at once, the gold light along the cable steadying into a single unbroken line from where we stood to the far platform, and for the first time since the second tremor, I heard the hall around us go completely, utterly silent. We walked the rest of the way without another tremor. My legs did not want to hold me by the time we reached the far platform, and Silara's hand in mine had not loosened once, not through any of it. For a moment, nobody in the hall moved at all. Then the silence broke into something I had not expected. Applause. Uneven at first and then rolling through the crowd the way the tremors had rolled through the bridge only minutes before. A pair of Threnai elders near the front lowered their heads to us, a gesture Silara later told me was reserved for genuine courage, rarely granted, and never before to a stranger from another world. I barely registered any of it. I was still trying to convince my legs that the ground beneath them was not about to move again. The council did not need long to review the walkway's own recorded logs. The regulator's tampering was there in plain telemetry. Time-stamped to the exact hour Korik had walked the bridge alone under the right of inspection, and there was no version of events left standing that put the blame anywhere else. He was removed from the council chamber before Vesa Thren finished speaking the formal words that closed the proving, and I did not see him on the station again. Vesa herself crossed the platform to where Silara and I stood, still catching our breath, still not letting go of each other's hands. "You walked it steady," she said, to me, which I had not expected, and to her daughter, which I understood mattered far more. Whatever began this claim, it did not end as an accident. Ambassador Whitmore told me afterward, once the Concord was signed the following morning with far more warmth on the Threnai side of the table than anyone had predicted, that the story of the Ember Walk had already spread through every level of the station by the time the ink was dry. A human who would not let go, even with the ground failing under him, had apparently proven worth more to the Threnai delegation than any clause we could have written into the treaty ourselves. Silara asked me, much later, once the hall had emptied and the plasma core had gone back to its slow, ordinary glow beneath an unbroken walkway, whether I regretted any of it. The stumble, the claim, the bridge, all of it starting from a single missed step at the edge of a crowd. I told her the truth. My hand had slipped once, reaching for anything solid in the middle of a fall I never saw coming. It had found her instead, and out of everything it could have found in that hall that night, it had not slipped again since. Not once. Not when the bridge shook, not when the heat rose, not when letting go would have been so much easier than holding on. Some accidents, I have learned since, are only mistakes if you let go of them afterward. I never did.